Well, the NBA trade deadline is 2 days away. Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, and all these big names have been moved, and Daryl Morey could not sit on his hands at all. He had to get in the mix, and he had to do so with the Dallas Mavericks, as Caleb Martin has been sent to the Dallas Mavericks in exchange for Quentin Grimes and a 2025 second-round pick that Derek will get into. That was previously the Sixers' very own pick. They get that back in the deal, and we have to discuss it all. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers trade deadline emergency podcast special, again with the deal being done today. The Sixers get into the mix. They get a guard back in exchange for a very versatile wing. A lot to talk about with Quentin Grimes as a restricted free agent. Has played in 47 of the Mavericks' 50 games this season, starting 12 of those contests. He is a fourth-year guard out of the University of Houston, has played for the New York Knicks, the Detroit Pistons, the Dallas Mavericks, and now jumping in with the Philadelphia 76ers. And very, very interested in this one. And we get a special guest with Kyle Neubeck jumping in after writing a story for allphly.com, giving his instant analysis. Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck, myself, Bree, we're all here for this emergency pod. Derek, your thoughts immediately as this one went down with the Sixers?
Yeah, I think my immediate thoughts were this was a relative surprise. You know, we have a lot of people that we will be talking about potential who could be traded, whether it's targets or people you would like to send out. I don't think Caleb was in the top 5 of maybe any of our lists on possibilities to be sent out, in part because he is a useful player who has played well in the playoffs and is under a long-term contract that they just gave him over the summer. I don't think he necessarily, obviously he has been out of the lineup a lot this year. So has everyone. That is the Philadelphia story. And he couldn't shoot to start the season, but he had been showing signs of rounding the corner. So I'm just surprised that they moved on. Now, once you get past the surprise, I think Quentin Grimes makes some sense. You know, he is a young player, 24 instead of Caleb at 29, who makes significantly less money, you know, $4.2 million instead of 8 point whatever that Caleb has, and is having a real good year shooting the basketball. So you give a little more of a perimeter skill set, maybe a little better at running through screens on the perimeter defensively, along with some shooting. It makes a lot of sense as a long-term pairing next to Maxey and McCain, if you're projecting them, which everyone I think is, as your long-term solution. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It's just a surprise. Now, obviously, there's some other ramifications to this because he makes $4 million less. You are a little bit closer to being able to deduct the luxury tax, so I'm sure everybody is secretly cheering for in the background. There is, if you let him walk, you have a more realistic pathway towards using the full non-tap mid-level, so maybe you have a better chance of bringing back Gershon, Yabu. So there's a bunch of smaller considerations, but I really think you look at Grimes, and again, he will be a restricted free agent this summer where you have full bird rights for. I think you look at him as a long-term fit next to Maxey and McCain, and doing so, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Hello, fellas. I didn't think I'd be here with you, but you gave me enough time.
Well, luckily, I was far enough away that it took me a while to drive back, and you had time to hop on.
I got a whole stinking article done in the meantime.
These things never happen when I'm home. It's amazing.
For me, it always used to be either I'd be in the shower or I was asleep and something would happen. So I'm thankful I was at a computer and able to get everything done. So, Derek, you hit on a lot of big points, but I want to reiterate something I just wrote over at allphly.com. I think one of the things you're seeing in this trade are the shifting priorities of both sides of this deal, right? So like on Dallas's end, and I already talked to our colleague, Tim Cato over at DLLS about maybe what the rationale on Dallas's side is. Dallas is a team that is trying to win now, expects to win now. And that's, you know, in spite of trading Luka Doncic, which is still a crazy thing. But Caleb Martin is somebody with an established playoff track record, right? For whatever his inconsistencies are as a regular season player, for the issues he's had staying healthy and whatnot this year, he's someone that we can point to and say, hey, look, this guy has had multiple big-time playoff series, has been part of big runs. And so Dallas, with the priorities that they have over there, said we would rather take the bet on this guy over the next 3 to 4 years than hoping that Grimes, who, you know, don't really know what he is as a playoff guy, that he'll be able to help Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving and whoever else they put together between now and the deadline. I also think they believe there's some redundancy with Max Christie in Dallas. And so it was, hey, what can we do to turn Grimes into something that we don't have? On the Sixers end of things, I really like it in the sense that he can play with either of Maxey and McCain. I think it's a good defensive profile. You're not going to allow, he's not going to be able to scale up the lineup defensively maybe as much as Martin. Like, I do think he's probably, and they're similar size-wise, but I think Grimes is better built to defend backcourt guys. As you mentioned, Derek, fight through screens, be that, point of attack type of guy. And I think what I really like, assuming that they keep him long-term, and the early indication is that they want to, and obviously that all depends on the money in the future, but he's sort of he's one of those no compromises type of guys, right? Like, he's a good shooter, he's a good defender. And so if you have him on the floor with any type of guard, any type of lineup, it's not what they have now, which is, hey, we need some shooting, so we have to put a 6-foot tall guard on the floor. We need some defense, and so we have to put Caleb Martin on the floor, where you have to live with some of the spacing and shooting concerns that he brings to the table. So while I think he's got his warts, I do think there's a little bit of I'm trying to put this in a nice way since we haven't even met the guy yet. I don't want to slander him too much. I don't think he improves necessarily the decision-making problem they have. I think he's someone who will make some silly mistakes and silly plays throughout the course of the game. But by and large, he's someone that can fit into a role around all of their most important players. And he's a useful defensive player, much younger than Martin. I think it's 4 years younger than Martin. So I think it's a really solid trade. And that's without factoring in the second round pick that you get back. Gives you at least one more asset to see what you can do with that. And then whatever the salary implications ends up being, I think Derek probably has a better handle on all that than I do.
So where I'll go with this one is...
No, you first. I was just going to address a couple questions in chat, but you go first.
Yeah. So where I'll look at this one is for Sixer fans who don't know a lot about him. Maybe they saw him in college and they liked him in college, Kansas and Houston. And what he did was, I'll look at, a lot of people were upset when the Sixers could not play DeAnthony Melton because of the back injury, and he could not stay on the floor. But when Sixer fans liked the backcourt of Maxey and Melton for what they did, and Melton was 6'2", but he leveled up because of how good he was with the wingspan and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that Quentin Grimes is DeAnthony Melton, but for those who really like that type of profile next to Tyrese Maxey, and you guys both mentioned the two guards, and we've talked about this a number of times, from the drafting of McCain to throughout the season, even seeing them, you still wanted some size next to them. Even with the other guards, you wanted more guard help with some size. You look at what DeAnthony Melton did, and he's not going to be a starter, I don't think, in that way. I don't know that to be true. I don't know anything as of yet. But when you look at Melton and you look at Grimes as the type of players, and remember, for the people who watched our show and even heard us all in the past, I always looked at DeAnthony Melton as a 6th starter. He just so happened to be on this particular team because of the talent surrounding him, where he could start, get away with some of the warts that he had. Colin Derrick always talked about him getting to the rim and finishing or not, because of what he couldn't do, even as athletic as he was, the issues that he had there. This is a guy who is similar to what DeAnthony Melton is and was when healthy, and is 2 inches taller, and right now is at the age of 24. So when I look at him and I see that, that's the type of vision I see with him. Will it all translate? We don't know. We have to see it all play out. But he's going to get a head start with Maxey. No McCain, unfortunately. But if the Sixers are to still do some things here, they do free up some spots there where you do add another guard who can ball handle a little bit. It may take one of those other veteran players off the floor that I know a lot of people have been tough watching them all season. And you get a young athletic guard on this roster right now. We all like Caleb Martin. We all like the deal. It was one of the bigger deals of the offseason for the price tag that they got him for. But this guy also plays right now. He played in 47 of the 50 games for the Dallas Mavericks. So luckily for him and Martin both, they don't have to get on the plane because the Sixers are playing the Mavericks tonight. They can just switch locker rooms, go get their physicals done, and move on. So we'll see what all happens. But that's one of the things that stands out to me with Melton and Grimes. And for what we saw from Melton, you see a little bit of that in Grimes, and we'll see if he can stick.
Yeah. So just a real quick questions from some commenters in the chat. Chill Guy wanted to know why give up on the one good contract to get under the tax. Well, first of all, this doesn't get them under the tax, and I don't know if they're going to pursue getting under the tax. They still would have to shed about $6 or $7 million to do so, which isn't impossible, but there's still a way to go. But the second thing is, I think they probably view, because Grimes will be a restricted free agent, I think they are confident they can get him back on a team-friendly contract. So I think they view it as trading one team-friendly contract for another, just maybe with a younger player, a more position of need, and possibly, and again, I'm only saying possibly because we don't actually know their motivation, could help them get under the tax this season and delay that repeater tax that nobody cares about, but I'm sure Josh Harris does. So that's sort of the other one. And from Al, basically wanted to know why give up on Caleb when we haven't really seen the team this year. I agree. We haven't really seen the team this year, and I certainly thought Caleb could be a fit. But again, I think they view, it's not like they're giving up on Caleb as much as they're pursuing Grimes, just because I think they probably view him as someone who is a long-term fit at a more of a position of need. I get it. Caleb, I think, was a pretty popular signing. Like I said, even though he's been relatively unavailable, I don't think he was underperforming per se. He was at the beginning of the season, but I think he was turning it around. And I think a lot of people viewed him as a team-friendly contract, including me. I think there's probably some disagreement or at least some hesitation around the league. Some people might have different evaluations just because role players now are scrutinized maybe more than they've ever been. But, I just think that this is a young player they feel can provide maybe a similar value, but just younger and more of a position of need.
And by the way, on the subject of his restricted free agency, there was reporting at the start of the season because they couldn't agree on extension talks. I believe that Grimes rejected a deal very similar. This is from Mark Stein, who also is over with the guys at the DLLS. He rejected a similar deal to the extension that Najee Marshall got. So that was a 3-year, $27 million contract. So that's what he and or his agent thought was not enough for him. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different once you actually get to free agency and you look around at the teams that have cap space to give you that type of money. I would guess he's not going to get a deal much different, if at all, than what Caleb Martin got. I think they'll probably be in same ballpark.
And 326 would be pretty much the same as what Caleb had left on his contract. So if he ends up having to walk back to that because the market's not going to offer him more, that would be very similar to Caleb's.
All right, we wanted to address the super chat from Sean Karp that says, thank you, $1.99. We appreciate it. He also did jump in the chat, though, saying a few things. He pointed out how Grimes used to cook Temple when he was with the Houston Cougars, and he's liked them ever since. So we'll see. And look, everybody hasn't really paid much attention to the Dallas Mavericks, maybe definitely not the Pistons a season ago. But you did see him a few seasons ago when he was with the New York Knicks, and he had some good moments there as a rookie, as a second-year player as well, before he was eventually traded to the Pistons. He's a nice player, and it's just a matter of what you like, especially with what you see next to Maxey out there on the floor, hitting those shots and making those defensive plays that helps balance things out overall, and what Nick Nurse decides to use him as a healthy player right now for this team. And Kyle and Derek, you guys will both be at the arena tonight. Not sure what you might get overall because of everything that happens and how early the trade is. We'll see what goes on there, but very interesting. Kyle, did not get your thoughts on as you pointed out, the Dallas piece of it, as they're very active right now. Caleb Martin, Anthony Davis, Max Christie. Yeah, your thoughts for people who did not have a chance to really hear your thoughts on the Luka Doncic blockbuster deal for Anthony Davis.
Oh, I mean, they should serve life in prison for that trade of Luka. It's one of the most. And look, I've been trying to. I don't want to be unfair to Anthony Davis specifically, right? Like future Hall of Famer, all defense type of player, having a great season, has been healthier than he's been in recent years. Right? He's very, very, very good. We saw that in the NBA as Derek goes clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack over there. Both of us going
furious. Everybody.
I thought I had that muted.
No. It's all right. Listen, it's one of those days. So I want to be fair to Anthony Davis, but you're talking about giving up a guy at 25 years old who is one of the most accomplished 25-year-old athletes in North American sports history, right? Like in terms of the individual stuff, the playoff performances. He just led a finals run last year where he went through the best teams in the conference and just dismantled them. And then, like, even when he was younger and they had worse teams, he's going against Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in LA, teams that are built to, like, hey, we'll throw wings at you and we'll throw 2 and 3 guys at you on ball, and just destroying those guys. And I think the most interesting part of all of it is less about the Dallas side and more about what does this mean for LeBron and what does this mean for, because it's going to be, and I think Rob Pelinka today, when he did the press conference announcing or introducing Luka, sort of admitted to it, right? Like, they need a big, and the big market is dry, is what he said. So that in some ways concedes this idea that, like, hey, despite the fact that we have 40-year-old LeBron, we made this trade because who the hell wouldn't make this trade? And we're going to be set up now for 5 years, 10 years, however long it is. So, credit to Pelinka for answering the phone from his old Nike buddy and absolutely taking him to the cleaners. But what the hell are the Mavericks doing for that trade? I think this trade is perfectly understandable for all the reasons we laid out, the Caleb Martin, Quentin Grimes deal. I am a little surprised they were able to get Philadelphia the extra pick on top of this. I'm not really sure what the incentive is there, other than Daryl saying, well, this guy just made a bad trade. I might as well try to get something else out of him.
Yeah.
Well,
also, apologies. I was using the wrong microphone, so when I went to mute it, I muted the wrong thing. So apologies. That one's on me.
I think they just went to go get Caleb Martin to try to slow down with Najee Marshall, Luka, when they see them in the playoffs in the 7-game series. They need all the length help that they could use. There's some defensive push there for the postseason when they play the Lakers. Well, this is an interesting one to start things off the top. We're going to have a trade deadline special on Thursday. Rich and I will be back tonight at 6:30 for the Sixers and the Mavs. So our pregame show will get underway at 6:30. Back at it tomorrow on the second night of a back-to-back when the Sixers host the Miami Heat. Final game before the NBA trade deadline, where things are already underway, from Dallas to LA, Sacramento to Chicago and Utah, and here in Philadelphia with Dallas as well. A lot of names being thrown out there for a lot of different teams around the association. Daryl Morey had to get in the mix. Quentin Grimes for Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin headed to Dallas. Quentin Grimes in the 2025 pick, second-round pick that Kyle just alluded to, is headed back to Philadelphia. And fellas, this is just the start. And if this is the early indication of how this trade deadline will be, it's going to be a very interesting one.
Hey, one last thing before we get on out of here. I do wonder if this lends more credence to the idea that Eric Gordon is out of here, because I do think that they are probably competing for a similar type of role. I know Gordon has had some interest from some from playoff teams around the league. Certainly the teams at the top always want a little bit of bench shooting, and if the Sixers really are saying, hey, we're trying to develop this guy and get him some minutes, I wonder if acquiring him changes just how little they're willing to give Gordon up for before Thursday's deadline.
And quickly, guys, just because of the way that both Justin Edwards and Ricky have been playing as of late, we have in the chat DC Marley saying Caleb became movable because both cheaper Edwards and Ricky and the rise of Yabu this season, as of late, especially for the Sixers. So, there's that. There's that. All right, fellas. Derek, you're muted. You wanted to throw something in there. You're muted, man. There you go.
You're really struggling with the mute button today.
Boy, I'll tell you what, when I want to mute myself, I can't. When I want to speak, I have myself muted. I am on fire right now. It was brought up by Mary whether or not this saves enough room to give keep Yabusele in the summer. So it's complicated, as always. This does save about $3 million in cap space over the summer. The real hiccup, they'd have to clear more. I'd have to do the math to find out exactly how much more. But they have to do, the real hiccup to me, even if they can clear enough cap space, using that tax or non-taxpayer mid-level would hard cap them at the first apron. And I would be very surprised if Daryl wants to do that. But it does make it a little more feasible, get them a little closer. Like I said, it would probably shave about $3 million off of their cap it over the summer. So it helps. It doesn't get them to where they need to be. And quite frankly, even if they get to where they need it to be, I'm not sure they would. Like I said, just because of the hard cap. We'll have much more to talk about that later.
Daryl Morey, Howard Roseman collab. Figure it out.
Yeah, it's contracts in the NBA aren't quite as easy to get out of as they are in football, so it's a little tougher.
Yeah. All right. Well, fellas, this was fun. We haven't done this in a while. You guys have been at games. Rich
We
and I
just
have
did
been
one
in
like
the
2 days
studio.
ago, Devon.
Well, I mean, to have all three of us together.
That's true.
This is
That's
good.
true.
This is good. This is good. All right. Well, we'll be back together on Thursday for the NBA trade deadline special here at the PHLY Sixers podcast. But tonight we have pre and post with Rich Hoffman. Get his thoughts on it. Talk to Kyle and Derek after the game as well tomorrow too. So for Derek, Kyle, and Bree, I'm Devon. We'll be back tonight for the Sixers pregame against the Caleb Martin-led Mavericks now and the Quentin Grimes-led Philadelphia 76ers. Everybody have a good rest of your Tuesday. We'll talk to you at 6:30 tonight right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast. Caleb Martin going to Dallas, Quentin Grimes to Philadelphia. We'll talk about it all tonight, and we'll see the basketball game tonight as well. We'll see you then.
We all silly like the mayor.